So, good day, good evening, good morning, all. Welcome to the third ISBNPA webinar, actually the third ever webinar as well of ISBNPA. This time it's the theories of motivation webinar, understanding and changing health behavior from a self-determination theory perspective. And we're really glad that we have Rich Ryan as speaker today. Over here. So I'm Rick Prince, and I'm going to give a short introduction about the webinars that we are organizing these 2 weeks, and some housekeeping to run everything as smoothly as possible. So we are really glad that we can organize this for our members of the ISBNPA. We do have a lot of special interest groups, 8 in total at the moment, and actually they are the people who organize this webinar, the webinars that we are giving in those weeks. So we do have special interest groups on aging, early care and education, theories of motivation, children and families, cancer prevention and management, policy and environments, E&M health, and socioeconomic inequalities. And you can find all those special interest groups on our website on www.isbnpa.org. So in last week and this week, we do have a total of 6 webinars, which you can also find on our website. There may be webinars that you are interested in as well. So there are 3 upcoming webinars and 2 webinars from last week. And we will have recordings or PowerPoint slides of the webinars on our website. So please have a look on our website under the header of events to see more information about our webinars. So we are using the GoToWebinar system, and as you may already, what you may have noticed is that your microphones are muted. That is to avoid a lot of noise going through the system, which may be disturbing during the presentation. However, we do value your input very much, and we really encourage you to ask questions which Rich can address after his talk. So you can already, during the talk, you can already ask questions. They will be addressed after the talk, and they will be moderated by Steph Kremers. So you can ask questions by opening the questions tab and type the questions in the enter a question for staff box. So that's the box below where the text actually is in. So if you click on the box above, the bigger box, you can't type. So really enter your question in the enter a question for staff box. You can send it to us, and we will make sure that Steph gets the questions and ask them to Rich. We may open the floor also by sharing your microphone if you want to. Then there is a button to raise your hand. However, there is a large audience at the moment, so you can only ask questions in this way if we explicitly mention that you can raise your hands to ask questions in that way. So from experience, we found that the full screen mode of the system really gives you a good, well, the best overview of the webinar. So we strongly recommend you using this full screen mode, which is there in the system. And another question, and another point is, if you ask a question using the system below, and if you are a special interest group member of the Theories of Motivation special interest group, please enter a hashtag or something with just the word SIG, so Steph knows that you're from the special interest group. So I will give the floor to Pedro now, who's going to introduce the webinar. So Pedro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rick. Digital floor. My first time on this type of floors, of settings. Thank you, first of all, and Antonio, for setting this up. And also, as a longtime member of ISBNPA, it's very nice to see that the special interest groups are getting up to speed. And I think this series of webinars have been a critical part of that. And I'm very happy to be part of that. In this now, in my role as part of the chairing committee of this new series of motivation special interest group. And that's the special interest group where this particular webinar fits. Welcome, everyone. Very glad to have this turnout. I guess it's fair to say that this is the largest so far of the webinars that have been conducted, and that's not responsibility of ISBNPA. I think it's just a testimony to the interest that our speaker today raises. And so let me just a brief word for those of you that are not familiar with ISBNPA or if you are familiar with ISBNPA or a member, have you not joined yet the special interest group on theories of motivation? It's a great forum that we're hoping. This is actually the first initiative that we are conducting after our meeting, our main initial meeting in Edinburgh. But stay tuned, consider submitting or becoming a member of the special interest group as well. You do have to be a member of the society, but we're hoping to continue this discussion. Maybe this webinar would actually be a great starting point for future discussions that we can conduct online, and there's other activities also that we're thinking of conducting in between meetings where we're hoping to keep this the topic of motivation in behavioral nutrition and physical activity alive. So so we're hoping to see many of you that have not been in touch connected with our special interest group. Now, as Rich mentioned, it's a great pleasure to have Professor Richard Ryan to speak to us and to such a large and broad and regionally diverse audience. I guess it's fair to say that all of us are kind of new to this type of setting, so we're hoping everything goes well, and I think we're very confident with the system that you'll be able to hear everything and see also the slides and also be able to interact. Introducing Rich Ryan is not easy, or maybe I should say it's easy in a way because many of you know his work and know the impact that he's had. Mostly through self-determination theory on psychology, many different areas of psychology. Is, as you know, a co-founder of SDT, self-determination theory, and that's we thought it would be appropriate to have one of the founding fathers of the theory to start this discussion or to start these seminars. He's among the most cited researchers in psychology, as you know. He's been an editor of Motivation and Emotion for many years. He's now on the consulting board of the new APA journal Motivation Science, which some of you may be aware of. He's done research, SDT-related research in many different areas in healthcare, in education, in sport, in work, psychotherapy, virtual environments as well. I've also had the pleasure of introducing Rich a number of years ago when he was a keynote speaker in Oslo at one of our initial meetings, ISBNPA meetings. He's published many research articles and chapter and books. Has given addresses all over the world. And he has received many awards throughout his career, been a visiting scientist in many institutions, and he now holds positions both in service where he has been for a long time, and also in Sydney, in the Australian Catholic University Institute of Positive Psychology. I could go on and on. I guess all of us share the excitement of being able to hear from one of the two researchers that have started this theory and have developed it through the years, and many of us have learned, and our work has been very much influenced by it. So, Rich, thank you very much for being with us once again. We hope you continue your relation with ISBNPA continues after this seminar. But we're very glad that you accepted. I know you were very busy. You're just traveling from Australia not too long ago. So, thanks for accepting our invitation and being available to share your thoughts with this large group of ISBNPA members. And also, we asked another well-known research in health behavior and health behavior change interventions, Professor Steph Kremers, who works at Maastricht University. Steph has been a long-time member of ISBNPA. He's been an associate editor of the journal now for a long time. His work has been devoted to studying behavioral nutrition and physical activity in many different areas, in particular in the field of obesity. He is also very experienced in the design and the testing of interventions and the study of determinants of dietary behavior and physical activity. If you're familiar with the term energy balance related behaviors, you've probably read Steph's work, because I think he was the one that coined the term that's been so useful. He's also very familiar with SDT and a number of other theoretical frameworks to understand and change health behavior. So he's also in the chairing committee of this special interest group, so he's the perfect moderator for this talk. So Steph, thank you also for being a support and joining us in this new way of conducting seminars. And Steph then will, after Rich's talk, Steph will take the lead in hosting your questions and keeping the rest of the discussion alive for the rest of this evening for us, morning for some of you. So I hope this is as exciting as it promises. I know Rich has lots to say, and we're looking forward to hearing from him. Thank you both again, and enjoy the session. Rich,
thank you very much. Thanks, Pedro. I guess I'm on now. Is that correct?
You're on.
Okay. Well, first I'd like to thank all of the organizers of this event, Antonio, Rick, Steph, Pedro. Thanks very much for getting this together. It looks like a nice format. I think I don't have a lot of experience in webinars either, but hopefully it'll go as planned. My idea was just to talk for about 30-35 minutes, and then really to have most of our time spent in questions and answers. Really, before I begin, I want to say that my comments today are going to be based on work that's been done by a lot of people. I put up here a list of some of the recent people I've been able to collaborate with. One of the really beautiful things about working in SDT is we have such a great international community of scholars interested in questions of motivation, and I've had the privilege of working with a number of them. And so really none of the work that I'll talk about today belongs to me alone. It's really a property of the SDT community. And just while I'm at that, I want to say that the SDT community has its next big meeting coming up in Victoria, Canada in June, so I hope to see many of the members of the audience there. I really want to begin today just by giving a brief overview of self-determination theory and the way in which it relates, I think, to issues in physical activity, nutrition, and other behaviors that have to do with people's health. SDT is an area where we've researched a lot of basic issues in motivation, really beginning with the concept of intrinsic motivation, which is the motivation we have to do things just because they're interesting and challenging for us. We moved quickly from studies of intrinsic motivation to the study of extrinsic motivation, which is really why people do things that may not be interesting or enjoyable, but may be of value to them. And that's of particular relevance to the discussion we have today as we look at how people might change their lifestyle or habits toward greater health. Really, all of our work in motivation showed us that things that promote people's intrinsic and most autonomous extrinsic motivation are also things that lead to their health and their wellness, and that's led to us to have many ideas about what constitutes basic well-being for people and what the universal ingredients of that are. And our work in motivation has really led to many, many other topics. The issue of how culture affects motivation, the dynamics of energy and vitality, how mindfulness and awareness allows people to better self-regulate. Many, many interesting issues, many of which we won't be able to talk about today. But I think the most important thing about SDT is it's also a theory that can be applied. Many theories in psychology have some basic science interest, but it's hard to know what to do with them. I think it's pretty readily apparent what we can do with self-determination theory, which is we can use it to enhance people's persistence and well-being over time. And today I kind of hope to focus especially on health-related behaviors, things like stopping smoking, changing drinking habits, increasing one's physical exercise, things that we know promote health, and how our motivation theory might speak to those issues. When we work in the area of health behavior, which I've been able to do over some number of years, we know that there's a lot of things people can do to improve their health. And sometimes as health practitioners, we wonder, well, why don't people do these things? I mean, they're pretty straightforward. If people want to live longer and have a healthier life, we know one thing to do is to avoid tobacco. Another is to improve your nutrition, to eat more fruits, more whole grains, less fats, less dairy products. Really important, I think, for people in ISBNPA and everybody in this audience. We know that it helps your health to engage in physical activity. Really, 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week, and many new reports show even many less minutes of that, but involved in some intense exercise, really produces some pretty massive health gains for people. So again, a pretty straightforward behavior that people can use to increase their health. And of course, avoiding excessive alcohol use is another thing that is pretty readily apparent to people. People know these things, but they don't always do them. In fact, I think the evidence shows that people don't always do what they know to be good for them, and they don't always do what their health professional tells them to do. Compliance can be pretty poor. Now, in self-determination theory, I think we believe that people have a natural inclination toward health and wellness. There's hardly anybody you talk to who says, gee, my goal in life is to become less healthy or less mentally well. Instead, people would say that's what they want to do. But there's just a lot of things that seem to get in the way of their living a healthy lifestyle or to adhering to what doctors tell them. And I think that's a central problem for a theory of motivation to tackle. You know, when you look at people's health behaviors, this is just a little sample of health behaviors from the U.S. You see that still we have close to 25% of our population smoking cigarettes. We have close to a majority of our poorer population being physically inactive. We have a high level of obesity. People don't sleep well. Things that all really matter for health aren't going well for everybody. And then even when people know what to do, they're not always compliant. I got these pictures from a recent trip in Australia. You see we are a smoke-free zone. Here you see people smoking in front of the smoke-free zone. Also, here's a sign that says danger. This is not a safe swimming area because it's known for sharks right there, but you see a lot of people swimming right in that very area. People don't always listen to the health warnings that come from professionals. And so a big problem for all of us is how to get people motivated to act in the direction of health. Now, we all know what motivation means. Motivation means simply that you're moved to act. And there's a lot of different ways we can try and move people to act. The old system of motivation, really the kind of training I had in motivation when I was growing up, looked something like this. The idea of motivation was if you had control over an organism, over its reinforcements and punishments, you could get it to do pretty much anything you wanted it to do by giving a contingency of reinforcement that was appropriate to shape the behavior. I think this is a very powerful idea about motivation. If we did have all the controls over the reinforcements and punishments that beset people in the real world, we probably could control a lot of their behaviors. The problem, therefore, is not that this kind of model of motivation is wrong. It's that it's really not appropriate to the situation we have with people, because in the real world, people have a lot of choices. People can do pretty much what they want to do. We don't have control of their immediate environment. And so because of that, I think really the whole field of motivation has changed quite a bit. Today, when we study motivation, we're much more concerned with not so much about how to control people from the outside, because we can't really control them from the outside, but more about how can we help people make the right choices in life, and then when they make those right choices, how could we help them sustain their behavior and their engagement over time. So it's really this idea that people have choices that's the thing that we have to grapple with, and then see if we can help them make the choices that we think are good for them. Of course, this week we all saw in the news that meats were particularly bad for us, particularly processed meats. So we say, well, one choice people have is to eat a lot of meat, but they have other choices too. They can continue to eat meat and horrible foods that you see here on the right. Those are all Super Bowl snack foods that are there, probably some of the unhealthiest things one could imagine. But on the left, of course, you see pasta and fruits and other things that people can also make a choice to eat. So the idea is what moves people to go in one direction or the other, and when they want to move in the left-hand direction here in terms of healthier foods, how can we help them do that? And in SDT, that means that our focus is really on what we call volitional behavior, people doing things willingly or because they see the value or the interest in doing that. Really, we think about two types of volitional behavior. One is intrinsic motivation, when you do something because you find it interesting, because you find it challenging, because you can see that there's growth or new things to learn in that domain. And the other kind of volitional behavior is what we call internalized motivation or autonomous extrinsic motivation. And that's when you do something because you really see the value of doing this behavior to gain an outcome that's worthwhile. Both of these are forms of interest, and there's a lot of ways you can support people's interest, and there's a lot of ways you can help people build value. There's also a lot of ways you can undermine people's interest and sense of value in an activity too, and that's what the issue about motivation is all about. So to give you the broadest strokes really about self-determination theory, I think I've put them on this slide here. In the broadest strokes, we say the things that will lead people toward doing volitional behavior and sustaining it over time are support basic psychological needs in the change process. There's three of these needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. The concept of competence is a concept that's really apparent in all theories of human motivation. Every theory of motivation says it's necessary, if we want to motivate people to do something, that they would feel that they're able to carry out the behavior and that they can be effective in doing so. So there's very little, I'd say, controversy about the idea that to motivate people we have to help them be competent. I think something that distinguishes self-determination theory is we argue that competence is usually not enough to motivate people over a sustained period of time. Sometimes we have high self-efficacy for behaviors we have no interest or value. Sometimes we don't even gain interest, we don't even gain skill or efficacy at something until we already think that it's something that would be worthwhile for us to pursue. So in self-determination theory, we think to motivate people, not only do we need to help them feel effectiveness and competence, but also to see that the behavior is something that they would autonomously do, something that fits with their values, something that will, in fact, lead them to some place that they see as worthwhile. So building that sense of autonomy for anything that we would like to see behavior change occur toward is a really essential part of motivation from an SDT standpoint. In addition, we think that relationships play a big role in changing behavior. People really only identify with it and want to take on the values of people to whom they'd like to feel connected. If people feel alienated from their practitioner or feel like they're treated coldly or without a sense of care, they're less likely to listen to that practitioner and then internalize the values or the goals that that person might have. So in our theory, we think all three of these things are really important in the sphere of motivation. Helping people build competence, yes, but also having them build a willingness and volition for what their goals are, and to feel connected and a sense of belonging with others as they pursue those goals. Autonomy is so important in self-determination theory. I want to just spend a minute about defining it further. When we say that somebody's autonomously motivated to engage in a behavior, we're saying that they feel willing to do so, to engage in the behavior. Willingness is not the same as independence. For us, independence means that you don't rely on other people for support or for help. But we think sometimes we can be autonomously dependent on others when we willingly or autonomously turn to others for help or for guidance. And sometimes we can be autonomously independent, as when we say, oh, we'd like to try something on our own, this time maybe without help or without guidance. This is a really important distinction in the healthcare industry, because mostly what we would like to build with our clients is not that they are completely independent of us, but that they can willingly turn to us for guidance or for help at times when they need it, and that at other times that they would be willingly attempt to do things on their own. Knowing that autonomy is not the same as independence means sometimes we can support people as they turn to dependence on us, and sometimes we can support them when they want to try things on their own. It's also important to note that autonomy has nothing to do with individualism or collectivism. People can be autonomously collectivistic when they really support the values of the group and the importance of group over self. They can be autonomously individualistic when they are very much behind in valuing individualist ideas. The importance of this distinction is that autonomy is important to people all over the world, no matter what culture they come from. To the extent that they do things willingly, whether they come from traditional or non-traditional cultures or from rich or poor cultures or individuals and classic ones, matters a lot for their long-term sustaining behavior. Finally, autonomy doesn't mean that you don't get any external inputs or you don't follow any external demands. The issue of autonomy is whether when you have an external input or somebody else gives you a guide from the outside, do you follow it willingly, or do you follow it because you feel pressured or coerced into doing so? So for us, it's not whether an input comes from the outside or a suggestion comes from the outside. It's whether you can concur with and see good reasons for engaging with that suggestion. Again, this is important in healthcare because we often need to make inputs, offer norms, give information to people about what might be best for them. And the important thing is not that we refrain from giving inputs or even advice, but rather we always are double checking with the client to see whether that's advice that they concur with or it's advice that they would resist. So it's important to note in healthcare that autonomy is really about creating willingness, not independence in people. And that means helping them to see the good reasons for doing things that we might endorse as healthcare professionals. When we started studying the issue of autonomy, we started with a really kind of fun phenomena we call intrinsic motivation. I say fun phenomena because intrinsic motivation pertains to all the things we do in life simply because they're fun or enjoyable. We were really interested in intrinsic motivation because it seemed to us to be a form of motivation that comes from inside people. It's spontaneous. It's people doing what they like and enjoy doing. And we wondered, what are the things that sustain such intrinsic motivation in the environment? Now, a kind of classic example of intrinsic motivation is children's play. If you look at this child up in the left corner playing in the sandbox, this child is playing because he finds the sandbox and the toys that are in it fun to manipulate and to enjoy. It happens while he's doing this. Many good things are happening to him. His brain is developing. He's learning spatial coordination. He's learning more about his own motor movements. But that's not why he's doing these activities. He's doing them because they're fun. If we told him that these are good for him, he might find them even less fun than he does just enjoying the activities themselves. So an important thing about intrinsic motivation is it's something people do just for its inherent interest, but oftentimes it yields side benefits for us in terms of health. For instance, we might find sports or physical activities to be particularly fun and enjoyable, and when we do so, we do them because they're interesting, but as it turns out, they may have health benefit for us. And there are many intrinsically motivated activities across the lifespan that we want to promote because, in fact, they yield side extrinsic benefits even while adding to people's positive experience. So when we first were studying intrinsic motivation, we were interested in what factors would support or undermine this truly autonomous form of human behavior. And we developed a very simple theory that said that people will be most intrinsically motivated if they can be in an environment where they feel connected to the others around, where they feel cared for so that they don't have to be anxious, and they can explore what's going on. They're going to be intrinsically motivated in a context where they can feel efficacy and competence in pursuing a behavior where their efforts are likely to produce some positive results. And finally, they will be intrinsically motivated if they can feel volition and willingness for their behavior. And anything that interferes with their feeling that the behavior is coming from themselves or being done for their own reasons, we reasoned would undermine intrinsic motivation. And we did lots and lots of experiments really in the late 1970s, 1980s, 1990s in laboratory settings to test our formulations about what supports and undermines intrinsic motivation. And I have here just a brief graph that picks up on some of these early experiments. Just as an example of that, we might bring people into a laboratory setting and give them a very interesting task to do, maybe a puzzle or a spatial game that they could play. And in one condition, we would give them choice about what goal they might have. In another condition, we might say, your goal in this play session is to reach X standard. And so in the second condition, we're imposing a goal on them. In the first condition, we give them a choice about their goal. And Then we would have them engage in the activity, and then when the experimental period is over, we leave them alone in the room to see would they turn back to this target activity when they think no one is watching or there are no further rewards or pressures to engage in the activity. We call that the free choice measure of intrinsic motivation. And that's really our gold standard for these laboratory experiments. And an example finding would be that when we give people choice about what goal they would have in a task, they're likely to be more intrinsically motivated to persist longer during free choice than if we imposed a goal on them, even a very easy goal. Similarly, when you give people choice over strategy versus tell them what strategy to use, they'll be more interested in the activity and play longer with it later. When you put pressure on them towards a certain kind of outcome, then they would be less likely to be interested in the activity subsequently, even when they meet the pressure that you put on them. Whereas an absence of pressure and really, again, a creation of a sense of choice enhances the sense of autonomy and enhances intrinsic motivation. Similarly, if you give people really difficult activities or too easy an activity, they won't find them intrinsically motivating, whereas activities where they can feel a lot of positive feedback, this leads them to be more intrinsically motivated. And finally, in experimental settings where you're kind of cold or you lack positive involvement with your participants, they become less intrinsically motivated for the activities that you direct them toward. And on the opposite side, a warm, more engaging, empathic experimenter leads people to be more intrinsically motivated, all other things aside. So these experimental findings led us to say, well, our theory has some validity. When people feel more autonomy or factors in the environment allow them to feel more autonomy, when they feel more competence, and when they feel more relatedness, they're more intrinsically motivated. The importance of these experimental studies of intrinsic motivation where they bring out some of the factors that are associated with people's feeling autonomous or not autonomous for doing a behavior. So for instance, in our experimental studies, we found that giving people choice allows them to feel more autonomy, and then they tend to be more intrinsically motivated. And I just want to show you an application of that same principle here to a study that is not mine. It's by Dominguez et al. It was published in Food Quality and Preference, and it was over the effects of choice on children's vegetable intake. It was a very well-done experiment, and that's one of the reasons I bring it up here. They had children in a laboratory setting have three conditions. In one they had pre-gotten the children's preferences for their favorite vegetables ahead of time. And in this laboratory setting, they looked at three conditions. One in which a child was given a choice of two preferred vegetables, and that would be the DCC condition here. In another condition, they were given both their preferred vegetables on a plate. They said you can eat as much of either of these vegetables as you like. And in the third condition, the experimenter simply said, this is the vegetable you'll have today, and they gave them one of their preferred vegetables. In this condition, in all three conditions, children are already getting their preferred vegetables, but you can see that in the two conditions where they have a choice over what they will eat, either where they got to choose the vegetable themselves or they got to choose to eat as much as they wanted to, they ate more than when they did not have a choice over a vegetable, even though what was given to them was a preferred vegetable. So this just shows that choice itself makes a difference on their subsequent behavior and their willingness to engage in it. I think it was a really interesting example of how choice can enhance a sense of autonomy and therefore behaviors we would like to promote. Another kind of controversial issue that came out of our early studies of intrinsic motivation was the fact that we could see that rewards sometimes don't enhance the motivation for behavior. Sometimes they can actually undermine the behavior. And that would be in the case where rewards are used in a way to control another person's behavior. When I use a reward to control your behavior, you may like getting the reward, but you'll also see yourself as doing the behavior because I'm rewarding you, which shifts your what we call locus of causality for behaving, your reason for behaving, away from I'm doing it because I want to do it to now I'm doing it because someone is rewarding me. And that undermines intrinsic motivation. There's been a lot of studies of the effects of rewards on intrinsic motivation, and I won't go into great detail with them here because it's a little bit beyond our purposes for here, but a good meta-analysis that I think summarizes the major effects that I think still stands true is one that's reported in this Psychological Bulletin 1999 article that you have before you on the graph. See here that in general, rewards have an undermining effect on intrinsic motivation, but tangible rewards have a somewhat larger effect because we usually give people tangible rewards when there's something we want them to do. On the other hand, verbal rewards, which is usually praise, telling people they did well at something, not only don't undermine, they typically enhance people's motivation, as we would predict. Verbal rewards typically enhance feelings of competence, which we would argue enhance intrinsic motivation, whereas tangible rewards tend to undermine people's feelings of autonomy and therefore have the negative effect they do. Similarly, unexpected rewards don't undermine intrinsic motivation because when you don't expect a reward, it hasn't been controlling your behavior and therefore would have no negative effect. But if I say, do this and I will give you this prize or this money or this expected reward, that tends to have a bigger undermining effect on intrinsic motivation. So in general, our point around rewards is that when rewards are used as a mechanism for controlling or getting people to do something, they tend to be experienced as controlling and to undermine behavior. But sometimes rewards can be used in a way that's unexpected or simply acknowledging people's competence, and in that case, they won't undermine motivation. Now again, there's lots of ways of showing the undermining effect. I'm just going to quickly run through a recent one that was shown by Ko Murayama. He did an undermining effect experiment inside an fMRI. In the first session, he has people doing a fun activity inside the magnet. They either get rewards for good performance trials, and they are very activated in the area of the brain called the bilateral striatum, where we sense reward effects. But I think it's interesting to note here that in this session 1 that people who aren't getting rewards at all are also activated in this reward area of the brain. Ko then brings them back in for a second session, and what you see here is a very different pattern of effect because in the second session, no rewards are now being given. So the people who were previously getting rewards now have no activation, or basically no activation in this area called the bilateral striatum. They're no longer feeling that this activity is rewarding at all, whereas people who never received extrinsic rewards still find it rewarding. This is just another classic way of showing this undermining effect. Because you can see that interest that was there in a group that never got rewarded can be undermined by people's expectation of rewards and then their withdrawal. So why is this of relevance to us? Well, a lot of times we think if we just give people rewards for things like weight change or losing weight, that this will lead them to be motivated to do it. But I think one of the problems that we see with using rewards as a way of getting people to change behavior is it only works as long as the rewards are in effect. And when you take those rewards away, then people have less internal motivation to engage in the behavior, and this is an undermining effect. There's an interesting experiment that was reported by Arlen Moeller and colleagues that was in the Journal of Obesity that I have before you on a screen. And here they were looking at a weight loss program where people were getting a financial incentive. I think it was $175 for engaging in some weight loss activities and education over a 3-week period. And Arlen and his group asked people the extent to which they were engaged in this program for the financial incentive, or whether the financial incentive was really not their reason for engaging in the program. And what you can see here is the graphs for people who were financially motivated and those who were not. You can see that the people who were not in it for the money, first of all, lost weight at a quicker rate during that first 3 weeks. But it's also true that people who were doing it for the money lost weight during the 3 weeks, but just not as much. What's more interesting, I think more important, is the maintenance data, what happens after the 3 weeks are over. And you can see here that people who were doing it not for financial incentive continue to maintain the weight loss over the 20-week study period. But people who were doing it for the financial incentive, now that the financial incentive is gone, start to regain the weight that they had lost before. So that's an undermining effect, showing that whereas financial incentives and external regulation can get you to do something, it's not effective over the long term. Intrinsic motivation can be a pretty powerful way of getting people to change behavior, and because Pedro Teixeira is on our panel here, I thought I would use an example right from one of his studies. Here's a study where he was looking at people who were engaged in a weight loss program and how intrinsically motivated they are for their exercise activity. This is a pretty dramatic graph here. You see that people who are intrinsically motivated for exercise are much more likely over the study period that he was looking at to lose and maintain their weight loss, whereas people who have lower intrinsic motivation for exercise engaging in less exercise over time, and that's associated with less weight loss. So it can be something we can use to harness behavior change when we can find intrinsically motivated activities that move us toward health. Unfortunately, a lot of the activities that do move us towards health aren't all that intrinsically motivated. They're usually things that we do because we think they're good for us. They are, in a sense, defined as extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation in our theory is really any motivation where you don't do it just for the inherent enjoyments, but you do it because there's something you'd like to gain or get from engaging in the behavior. We see many different forms of external regulation, extrinsic behavior that move all the way from very controlling ones like external regulation, which is down here on the left-hand side of your screen, all the way up to what we call integration, which is a highly autonomous form of extrinsic motivation. Let me just run through these quickly. External regulation is when you do things because somebody else has a reward or punishment that's controlling your behavior. As I've just pointed out, external regulation can be really powerful. The problem is it's hard to maintain it over time. To maintain control over someone's behavior with rewards and punishments, you've got to keep having a lot of powerful rewards and punishments. And so typically the problem with this form of motivating people is not that it doesn't work, but rather it doesn't work long. As soon as the rewards and punishments are not in the immediate environment, the behavior itself dissipates. Somewhat more autonomous in our viewpoint is what we call introjection. Introjection is when you do something because you feel bad about yourself if you don't do it, and you feel better about yourself, have better self-esteem when you do. A lot of our health-related fitness behaviors are motivated by introjection. We want to look better so that we can have better self-esteem, or we want to avoid the guilt that comes from falling below certain standards of weight or appearance. Introjection can be a very powerful motive. Again, when we study introjection, we see that its problem is not that it lacks power, but rather it lacks stability. People who are highly introjected, when they start to have failures, for instance, can quickly lose their motivation to continue an activity. And also sometimes when you're introjected and you finally get some of their image rewards that you were hoping for, they don't show the payoff you expected, and motivation drops. Still, what's somewhat more autonomous on its continuum motivation is what we call identification. That's when you really consciously value an activity and you do it because you know it's worthwhile. And in the health domain, this is really the main kind of motivation we're trying to build in people, which is that they can see the value of engaging in health-related behaviors, and then they integrate them in with the other parts of their life so that they can ongoingly engage in these behaviors effectively and willingly. That, to us, is where the best maintenance in behavior change is going to come from. I'm just going to show you a couple quick examples of that. So this first one comes from a study that was done or led by Martin Standage in the UK. And what Martin had people do is he had them wear an ActiHeart, which is a device that measures physical activity relatively accurately and he had them wear it for a week's time. Before they began the trial, however, they were asked, why do you engage in exercise behaviors? And people gave many reasons. Some were external reasons, like my doctor told me I had to. Some were introjected reasons, like I feel guilty about myself when I don't exercise. Some would be identified reasons, like I really see the value of exercise for my health. And some people actually find exercise interesting and enjoyable, and that would be intrinsic motivation. So people gave their reasons for why they exercise, and then Martin predicted from those reasons for exercising whether they actually exercise over the next week according to the ActiHeart readings. And here we're looking at the correlations with the bouts of exercise, of moderate intensity exercise that met the American College of Sport Medicine, American Health Association guidelines for what constituted a meaningful bout of exercise. And you can see that the only reliable motivations predicting exercise are identified in intrinsic motivation. Only autonomous motivation seems to predict maintained behavior over the week's time. Similarly, here's a study that was led by Luc Pelletier. It was published in Motivation and Emotion some years back, where he shows that the relative autonomy, this box here in the middle, motivation for dietary behaviors, the relative autonomy of your motivation for changing behaviors here at week 13 predicts actual change in eating behavior over the next 13 weeks, so that 13 weeks later, people who were high in autonomy for dietary change were eating food with a lower percentage of calories from fat and a lower percentage of calories from saturated fat, which is showing up in both improved body weight and better cholesterol counts. So again, more autonomous motivation predicting more reliably good behavior change that results in health-related outcomes. Here's another example from my study done by Pedro. Here again, we're looking at people's overall autonomy, not just their intrinsic motivation, but their overall autonomy for engaging in physical activity. And here in these graphs, he's showing both concurrent and prospective predictions of motivation on exercise activity. And you can see here that at 12 months, people's relative autonomy for exercising is predicting degree of moderate and vigorous exercise at 24 months, so 1 year later. And similarly, their motives taken at 24 months is predicting their exercise at 36 months, 1 year later, showing that knowing how autonomous people are for an activity does predict their long-term outcomes. Even when people enter treatment programs, their autonomy for entering the treatment programs makes a difference in terms of what outcomes they will get. This is a recent study from Carter and Kelly with people who are coming into treatment for eating disorders. And what they show is the people who have the higher autonomous motivation for treatment are showing quicker symptom improvement over the course of the treatment program, a finding that we've seen in a number of studies. So I just want to summarize some of this by saying, yeah, it's great that autonomous motivation predicts a lot of good things across periods of lifespan, across socioeconomic status, across cultures. The more autonomous people's motivation is, the more the behavior, the target behaviors will be sustained over time, the better the people's learning will be, the higher their energy and vitality, and overall, the better their well-being. So, it's pretty clear from an SDT standpoint that we have the evidence that says autonomy is better. And so we really want to be moving people toward more autonomous forms of regulation when they're engaged in health-oriented behaviors. And to do so, we go back to our pretty simple theory here. We do so by trying to support basic psychological need satisfaction in the course of their changing the behavior. So we want to help people's autonomy by providing them choices and sharing in their frame of reference and not putting external pressure on them that will help them internalize. We want to help them gain confidence, and we want to help them feel some support and belonging. And so I want to just spend a minute here talking about that in some more detail, because I hope that's really where we spend our time in question and answers, about how it is that we support other people's autonomy. As a clinician, I have to say, to me, the key of autonomy, of supporting other people's autonomy, is always beginning by taking their frame of reference, by beginning with empathy for the situation they're in, knowing what kinds of changes they want to make and what obstacles they see in the way of change is really important before we make any decisions about how they might move in a direction of greater health. We always want to encourage them to take interest in their own behavior and to be informed by their experience, both failures and successes on the road to positive change. When we give people choices, we want to make sure they're meaningful choices and that there are also different options that they see as pathways to change, because everybody can find their own unique way to an outcome. And when we do have a specific thing we think is important for people to do, we give a rationale so that they can have a reason for engaging in behavior. Nobody can autonomously do something unless they have a good reason for doing so. So rationale becomes really important in supporting people's autonomy. And finally, we always want to minimize the use of shoulds, musts, and controlling kind of language. Autonomy is really important, but so is competence, and competence is built by designing programs and activities that people can really handle, both have fun doing, but also can meet the challenges that we are offering to them. So we want to build activities that are optimally challenging. We don't want to have people do things right away that they can't accomplish. So when it comes to dietary change or exercise, we want to start small, have proximal goals that people can really succeed at, so they build that sense of competence and efficacy as they move forward. And when we give feedback, it's really informational. It's really about how they can do better rather than critical. It's really never about judging them as people, but really just seeing what's gone right and what's gone wrong. And finally, we want to have an atmosphere for change that's really one that conveys respect for all the individuals who are participating in it, where they can feel significant and valued and cared for, especially when they face challenges. There's nothing more important for us as healthcare professionals to when people run into failures or difficulties, that's when they get our care and concern rather than rejection or disapproval. So warmth and inclusion is really important. In fact, one of the item that we find to be our biggest predictor of people really engaging in any kind of change-related behavior is the following item, which is my practitioner likes me. You notice here it's not I like my practitioner or my practitioner is cool. It's that my practitioner likes me, that they see a value in me as a participant. So these are the three really important things that we would say in terms of behavior change, that when practitioners can support autonomy, competence, and relatedness, people are much more likely to move in a direction of positive change. I really want to leave a lot of time for questions, so I just want to get to a couple of examples of this from the literature so we can move pretty quickly to questions and answers. This was an old study just to illustrate the importance of autonomy support on a very simple health-related behavior, which is taking your medication. This was a study that was led by Jeff Williams, who we've done a lot of our intervention work with here at Rochester, and Gail Roden from Clark University and other colleagues. In this study, it was a study of a group of patients, about 100 of them, who had a chronic illness, for which the major treatment was to take an oral medication once or twice a day. Now, we know in the United States people typically don't comply with medication prescriptions. Only about 40% to 60% of the time do people accurately take medications. And so this is an important problem. And here, this was a pretty easy regimen. Before we studied their medication taking, however, we had people fill out a questionnaire about their prescribing physician and how autonomy supportive or controlling was the climate provided by that prescribing physician. And then we also asked them, why are you taking your medication, using the kind of autonomous regulation scale that you saw before. So we were asking, how much do you identify with the value of taking this medication versus how controlled are you in taking it. And what these correlations show is that people were more adherent when they had autonomous reasons for taking medications, when they really could see the value in the doing of it. How do we know that? Well, in this study, after people were prescribed medications, we called them on the phone 2 days into their prescription and said, we'd like to verify how many pills you have in your medication prescription. So we asked them to dump them out and count them for us before the phone, and then we matched that with how many should be there after 2 days. We did the same thing again at 14 days, so 2 weeks into their regimen. We're seeing how closely their pill count matched how many pills should be there if they were adherent. And we also got a self-report of their adherence, and all of these indices strongly were associated with autonomous regulation. And interestingly, the more autonomy supportive the physician, the more likely it was that a person was to be autonomously motivated. You can see here the path model, that autonomy support from the healthcare practitioner predicts the patient's more autonomous motivation because they've done a better job at helping them internalize the reasons for taking medication. And this in turn accounts for over 50% of the variance in the composite score. So people who are more autonomously motivated, much more adherent. And of course, this is a really important issue in almost every healthcare domain. Just as another study on this, this is a study of adherence to HIV medications that was led by Sarah Kennedy out in San Francisco area. And now what she and her team showed here is that the more autonomy support the person who has HIV has from both family and their medical provider, the more likely they are to feel less psychological distress, but also more autonomous motivation to take their medications, which then leads through a pathway through perceived competence to greater adherence overall. If you just take a little bit even closer look at her data here, you see that autonomous motivation is very strongly related to provider autonomy support. So we as providers play a really important role in shaping the autonomy people have for taking medications, and here taking HIV medications being a really important part of the regimen for health and people with HIV being fostered by more autonomy supportive healthcare providers. So I could show a lot of studies like this, but I think an easier way is just to go to a meta-analysis here. Is the meta-analysis Eng et al. Meta-analysis that was on self-determination theories that's been applied to health contexts. This appears in Perspectives in Psych Science. This is just one of the statistics from this. This is 67 studies where healthcare practitioners have provided either autonomy supportive or controlling styles to promote behaviors, and you can see how autonomy support really promotes intrinsic motivation and identified motivation, whereas controlling styles are much more associated with external regulation and amotivation. And as you can see down at the bottom two rungs here, autonomy support produces more autonomous motivation, which we know to be related to more adherence and compliance. And the opposite is true for controlled motivation. This just shows how important our healthcare provider motivation, our style of communicating is to our patients. The more we can support autonomy, the more likely they are to engage in high-quality motivation with respect to health behaviors. In fact, the Eng et al. Meta-analysis really tested a number of loops in the overall self-determination theory model. And the main one that I think is most important for our conversation today is how autonomy-supportive healthcare climates that we provide as practitioners satisfy basic needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness in our patients. And these, in turn, are related to decreased mental distress and psychopathology, increased quality of life on the psychological side, but also lead to better healthy behaviors, less smoking, less drinking, and more physical activity whenever there's interventions in that regard. So physiological indicators are also being enhanced when people's need satisfaction happens in the motivational climate. So SDT has been pretty successful in the randomized controlled trials. We haven't had enough of them out there, but there have been randomized controlled trials, which, as all of you know, is really the state of the art in our evidence base for not smoking, for physical activity, for weight loss, for diabetes management, both type 1 and type 2, for medication adherence, for engaging in healthy dietary change, and for dental hygiene as well. I say there's been RCTs on all of these things, but we still can use more because we're just beginning to identify what the real healthy ingredients are in SDT-supported interventions. Right now, Pedro and others are putting together a joint paper, a joint committee paper on really the multiple ingredients that make for high-quality interventions from an SDT standpoint. I think we have something like 38 specific behaviors that we see as part of the effectiveness of needs support. But I want to emphasize just a final few here in my last comments, which is what I think the data shows from SDT is that it's most important for us as practitioners to really support people's autonomy. It's both a medical ethic for all of us, but it's also effective practice. And in supporting autonomy, it means we really listen to our patients. We try and understand their perspective, both why they want to and why they are resisting at times change. We want to acknowledge their feelings and the content of their complaints. We also want to provide as many choices and effective options as we can, because people can find different pathways to health, and sometimes it's nice when they can tailor it to their own idiosyncratic way of change. When there are things that we really do think are important, we have to have a good rationale for it. We shouldn't suggest changes that we don't have good reasons to support. And we always want to support initiative and experimentation in the direction of health and change. Really, the more our patients can be engaged with us as creative co-designers of our regimens, the better all of us are. We both learn things from our patients, and of course they feel more ownership and agency in the process of change. And finally, at all times we want to remain non-judgmental. It's tough to change in the direction of greater health. All of us understand what those obstacles are, and the more we can empathize with our clients as they tackle those things, the more effective we're going to be in producing long-term change. So that was just some of the comments I wanted to make. I again want to thank my colleagues at Australian Catholic University at Rochester, at Immersive Inc., and really everybody at ISBNPA for organizing this. I'm looking forward to a question and answer session and to seeing what kind of issues you have in applying self-determination theory. Thanks for listening.
Okay, Rich, this was really great. I think we can now start the question and answering session. This was really an excellent talk, and meanwhile I got many questions from the audience, so that's great. So first of all, I must tell the audience that I guess I will not be able to deal with every question that you asked, but I'll do my best, and we'll see how far we can get. But if I can't manage to deal with the question, that specific question that you asked, my apologies in advance. But of course, feel free to ask questions while we are discussing, or maybe you'd like to add to the discussion that we have. So I'll try to give the input while you are giving it. And at the same time, I see some questions coming in, and then of course I need to interpret your questions. So I'm not totally convinced, of course, whether I interpret your question okay, but again, I'll do my best. Rich, just to start off, I saw one question coming by, which was kind of general, so I think that may be good to start with. The question was about the popularity of the theory. The theory has become has gained in popularity over the past years in the field of dietary behavior and physical activity. And of course, you must have thought about it or talked to people about it, about reasons for it. Do you have any ideas on what the main reasons are for the increasing popularity of the self-determination theory?
Well, I think there's probably two reasons for the increasing popularity, but one is I think just the change in healthcare treatment atmospheres. I think we've seen over time that the more we use external controls to try and produce change, what we get is poor maintenance and transfer of behaviors. And so I think the ineffectiveness of some of the more externally regulating forms of motivation has become apparent over time. And at the same time, we have seen how important it is that people develop a strong volition for change and how much impact that can have on sustained change over time. So I think SDT was the right theory at the right time, as we've seen the need for interventions that really build on people's capacity for self-regulation. You know, we've been there with a theory that I think speaks to those issues. I think the theory's grown a lot too because it is applicable. You can design interventions to increase autonomy, to increase people's feelings of competence, to increase their sense of belongingness. So it has a great deal of practicality, and I think that has really helped a lot. If you look at where SDT is popular, it's popular in sport, it's popular in health domains, it's popular in psychotherapy, it's popular in education, because these are places we can put it to work.
Yeah. Okay, just to pick up on that, I also saw a question coming in asking about putting it in practice. I think this person was in the exercise field, and asked how can I put this in practice, because I have limited time as a practitioner, and applying SDT in practice appears to take a lot of time. How to deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I think it's interesting about the issue of time and practice. So a lot of parts of SDT don't take a lot of time. So for instance, we think understanding the perspective of say the people you want to get to exercise sounds like it might take a lot of time, but maybe it doesn't take a lot of time. Sometimes it's just letting people say, give a list of what they want, or giving an opportunity for feedback after a session. This is a way in which people can have voice or feel like their perspective is being understood or heard. Sometimes it just means, a quick note of empathy when you see somebody struggling, just to recognize that they have a point of view out there. I think some of the things that might sound like a lot of time really don't take a lot of time. And sometimes the high quality things we can do are really done in a quite immediate way. When we have a menu of choice for kinds of exercise somebody can do, that takes no more time to hand them the menu than it takes to hand the single regimen that we otherwise might give them to do. So there are many things that I don't think take more time. They just take a little bit of engineering and thought about how can I enhance autonomy in my exercise class, or how can I exercise people's ability to feel efficacious in that class, or how can I maximize the feeling of togetherness in this class. I think there's a lot of little hints from SDT that can increase those things without spending a lot more time.
Well, yeah, but I think if I envision these people that are overweight and got this message from their doctor saying that they need to exercise more, so they have control types of motivation, maybe even sometimes amotivation, that may take more time. Over and above, let's say, more traditional ways of saying, okay, I know that it's hard, but just exercise more.
Yeah. I think one of the problems with not taking a little extra time there is sometimes we try and run over the obstacles a person's facing without really understanding them. So if I just say, well, I know this is hard, but just get to it, or I take the Nike approach, just do it, or I just take out a bigger carrot or a bigger stick, that may not be effective because I haven't quite understood what the obstacle was. Maybe there's a particular pain that somebody's facing as they engage in a set of exercises, and we could design a set of exercises that work around that pain. Or there's some other difficulty they're having around timing or scheduling. Sometimes when we know what the obstacle is, we can much better address it than trying to run it over with carrots or sticks, or with just admonitions of just do it. So that's one place where I think understanding the framework, the point of view of your clients is really key, because helping them with the specific obstacles they face almost always important.
Related to this, there are also questions coming in on, let's say, alternative forms of interventions rather than just face-to-face interventions. People asking whether SDT perspectives can also be used in, let's say, digital interventions, e-health kind of interventions. What are your ideas about that?
I think this is really the wave of the future, because there's not enough of us practitioners to do face-to-face interventions with everybody who needs it out there. And we have an epidemic of obesity in some countries, and we're just not going to have enough face-to-face people to really help that out. But we can hit people through technology, and I think this is really a big wave of the future for SDT. Recently, for instance, I've been working with Raphael Calvel from the University of Sydney. He engages in what's called positive computing. Here he's trying to harness technology to deliver things that would make us healthier in ways that are engaging and motivating. And he's using SDT just in the very design of the way in which he gives feedback or has the delivery of messages to people. And just to give you an example of that, we might, for instance, wear today many of us have devices that are counting our steps or giving us feedback about how much physical activity we are in the day. Well, technology can also give you motivational messages to go along with that. Those messages could be controlling, or they could be autonomy supportive. And I've seen data that suggests that when you give people regular messages that are autonomy supportive, it can actually enhance the amount in which they exercise, and those can be delivered through technology at almost no cost and very scalable. Similarly, when I think about technologies and reaching people, SDT has a lot to say about how we frame messages. What do we say are the benefits of exercise, and what are the reasons for doing it? Of course, when we frame those in ways that really have more to do with health and they have to do with extrinsic outcomes like image, they're more likely to take for people. So even in the way we deliver communications across technology, SDT has some things to say. So I think both in terms of direct interventions and in messaging, SDT has a big role in the technology well-being interface.
Okay, I'm just scrolling through the questions that are coming in kind of quickly, so that's good. Keep on doing that. I say to the audience. Someone is asking me more explicitly about motivational interviewing as in the relationship with self-determination theory. Of course, some of us have experienced the engagement and maybe even the marriage between self-determination theory and motivational interviewing. How are you how are you looking at that relationship now?
Well, motivational interviewing, especially as it was originally conceived, is really I think quite congruent with self-determination theory in a focus on trying to promote clients' autonomous engagement in treatment. Part of the big goal of motivational interviewing from the very beginning was to take the frame of reference of the client, to really understand it from the inside, to help them find their own reasons for why they would want to engage in treatment in a volitional way. And I think insofar as MI is practiced with a real eye toward supporting autonomy, then I think it's completely congruent with SDT. And in fact, we've used a lot of MI techniques in our SDT interventions because of their consistency with both building autonomy and with building competence.
Okay, yeah. In terms of providing choices, Rich, Lindsay Roberts is asking, is there a point or number that too many options may become counterproductive in terms of facilitating autonomy?
Yeah, the issue of choice is really an interesting one, both from a research and a practical standpoint. So when we say in self-determination theory that the experience of choice is important, it's really that people feel choiceful about what they're doing. Sometimes you can only have one choice, but we know it's the one that really fits with the person's interests and what they want to be doing. So we don't need to have a menu out there. We just provide them with the thing we know is already fitting, and then they're on board with us. But a lot of times it helps people to feel empowered when they have choices between alternatives, that then they can find the best fit for them. So what we would argue is that that feeling of empowerment is going to come about, though, only if it's meaningful choice. So you want to have options that are not just fake options or just there for the number, but things that really would make a difference in terms of trying it this way or trying it that way for that person. That's a meaningful choice. You can become absurd in sort of the number of choices you offer people. At some point, if you give people too many choices, it just becomes taxing and not very meaningful. And I think this is probably where the questioner's question is coming from. There's probably some number beyond which the choice is now feeling like a chore rather than a choice. And I think what I've seen in the data out there is really once you get above 4 to 6 choices on any kind of list, it starts to become a bit cognitive taxing for people. Probably in most of our domains, we don't need that many choices about the pathways people will take toward health. So I would say keep them meaningful and keep them to a minimum, but keep them real, and then choices will make a difference.
Yeah, this is of course really relevant for those that work with weight gain, prevention, or weight loss, even because you can imagine that there are much more than 4 to 6 options of people in order to deal with their own weight. Just dietary behavioral choices. It can be increasing fruit, decreasing snacks, stop skipping breakfast, etc. So how to deal with that?
Yeah, and I think some of that, of course, is that you want to provide the choices when they're relevant, as you're encountering each of these domains of activity. So you want choices within each pathway probably, and then not too many, and then and also allow experimentation. So I think an important element of choice is people can try something out, and then when it either works or doesn't work, you treat the information that comes back from that as true information. If something doesn't work, it's not a failure, and we've learned something from that. Now we're going to try another option, or we're going to modify the option we have. So I think that flexibility is really important, and that also helps a person feel like they're part of the team working with you in the direction of change. They have empowerment because you're shaping the goals together in a way that's going to work for them.
Okay. I had a question coming in kind of at the beginning of your talk when you were talking when you were introducing the topic of autonomy, and this person asked, how much do you think the average person is aware of their own level of autonomy? And in between brackets, is that important?
Well, you know, I don't think if you ask most people if you went up on the street to most people and said, what's your level of autonomy, they would think, oh my gosh, you know, who are you? It's a strange question. It's not something I think we would reflect in that way about, but I will say this, it's very salient to people when they're being controlled. People know when they're being controlled, and they also know when they're doing something freely. So in other words, for any given behavior, we have a very good sense of whether we have autonomy or we're being controlled. I don't think we think of it in terms of like how on average autonomous I am, but when I'm doing a task at work, I know whether it's something I'm doing willingly or something I'm being forced to do. Or when I'm doing a chore at home, I know whether it's something, I know where my autonomy sits. And that's why it's pretty easy to assess the relative autonomy for any given behavior, which is where most of our assessments go, is toward behaviors or domains of behavior. And I think people have a pretty good sense of it. If it wasn't something that we felt strongly about, it wouldn't have the strong motivational impacts it does.
Someone from this SIG, I think it's Lena Harens, asking, I sometimes have the feeling that rewards can be considered personally relevant. What would that mean for people's motivation?
Rewards being personally relevant. Well, again, rewards are a complicated issue. I think the issue about rewards is whether the person who's giving the rewards is doing it with the intent of trying to control a behavioral outcome. So if the person who's using rewards is doing it for that reason, it's likely to be interpreted as control by the recipient and have an undermining effect. Now, when we say that rewards are personally relevant, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I would say, again, SDT has never taken the position that rewards are all good or all bad. It's in what way are we using rewards to motivate behavior? Personally relevant rewards might mean that, I find value in the outcome, and that might actually promote some volitional action. So, Lee could give me a follow-up if I didn't quite get to her question.
Yeah, okay. So, Lane, if this wasn't what you meant, then just let me know. Thanks for that. I talked to a general practitioner yesterday, and I was talking to her about the topic that we are dealing with now, also about rewards, and then she asked me, okay, so does that mean that I can't even give my clients any compliments anymore then?
Well, again, unexpected rewards don't undermine any behavior because they're not controlling people. If she were giving out those things and saying, if you do this, then I'll give you these things when you come to my office, that would be controlling. But unexpected rewards, little gifts from your physician, not going to be a problem for anybody's motivation. And on the contrary, it might make you feel happy and a little bit closer to your physician. So that's not a problem. It's the contingent use of rewards to control behavior that is the problematic use.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have to continue to give those babies out.
Okay, that's good. I'll get back to her. Okay, just a whole different kind of question. It's about gaming. If you feel uncomfortable about any questions that I ask you, Rich, just tell me. But this one is about gaming. Gaming seems to be able to tap many of the processes to forward it within SDT. Do you see value in using some of it, of the game design principles within health contexts, such as exercise promotion?
Absolutely. One of the reasons that I've been really interested in studying gaming is, well as my colleagues, Andy Shabilsky and Scott Rigby and others, is because we think games have broader applicability. So, games are pretty good at motivating people to be engaged over a sustained period of time, or some of them are. And so what we've tried to do is study what about them makes them so engaging, even addicting to people. And of course, what we find is the best games, the most, quote, addictive games that are out there, the ones that are really engaging, are the ones that offer players a lot of autonomy, a lot of choices, a lot of pathways they can go down, allow them to feel a lot of competence feedback and give them feedback in multiple dimensions and ways, and let them level up and feel progress. and finally lets them connect with other players and feel like teamwork, camaraderie, and belonging. So games have these elements in them, and that's really what predicts their longevity as games and their popularity as games. The particular features in games that do that, how they build in choice, how they build in opportunities for relatedness, are things we can learn from. And I think as we're trying to bring health interventions to scale, we really need to know about gamification in this regard, because we can offer apps and we can offer programs for people and workouts that we can technologically deliver, but we also need to do so with some of the bells and whistles that allow people to feel autonomy, competence, and relatedness as they engage in those apps. That's what's going to make them successful and going to change behavior over time. So I think this interface between technology, gamification, and the motivational implications of gamification and health outcomes really, really a big area of opportunity for us all now.
Okay. We're doing great, Rich, aren't we? I think I'll just...
That's for the audience to judge.
In terms of the procedure, I think I will just, I think I have 5 to 7 minutes now, so also for the audience, I think we will continue about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we need to close. I've had 2 or more questions asking about the same thing, so apparently seen as relevant by the audience, and it's kind of an intriguing question asking about the role of integrated regulation versus intrinsic motivation. And I think, again, I'm interpreting here, but of course many of us feel that intrinsic motivation for a certain type of audience may be too much to ask.
Right.
So we may have to reset our goal towards trying to promote integrated motivation. Another question was about whether you have empirical data on the relevance of integrated regulation versus intrinsic motivations in terms of predicting sustainable behavior change.
Yeah, I think in many of the realms that we're working in the health behavior realm, the behaviors that we want to encourage over time are not likely to be intrinsically motivated, or at least that's going to be hard to build in. Things like changing your diet, things like engaging in regular exercise. Some of these things aren't always going to be intrinsically motivated. They take discipline and they take a strong value to motivate a person to want to carry them out on an everyday basis or on a regular basis. So I think the most important kind of motivation that we can be promoting is in fact identified in integrated motivation, because these are the forms of extrinsic motivation where I'm doing something not because it's always fun or interesting, but because I really do understand the value of it and I have found a way to fit it in with my other activities in life, which is where integrated motivation comes in, that I see that this lifestyle change that I need to make is also one that I will be able to bring into consistency with everything else in my life. And just as an example of that, if for instance dietary change is a big issue for me, and yet I'm a person who has a lot of does a lot of traveling and a lot of eating out, I have a different set of problems on my hand than if I'm a person who has dietary change but I don't engage in a lot of that restaurant going out behavior. Different set of things to integrate there. So I would put most of the action in the extrinsic motivation continuum in trying to get people to really fully internalize the idea of change, and I think that's what has shown itself to be the best outcomes for those kinds of difficult to sustain behaviors over time. I think intrinsic motivation is a place we can learn a lot from in experiments and in testing the things that promote and undermine it, but in terms of promoting long-term change behavior, I think integration and identification is where it's at.
Yeah, okay. Final question, because I see that both Rick and Antonio are urging me to come to an end.
Okay.
So final question, more of a general question. I know many of the people in the audience have been trained in social cognitive theory kind of theories, let's say traditional theories such as theory of planned behavior. How do you think self-determination theory relates to those social cognitive theories such as the theory of planned behavior?
Well, let me just I'm just going to take the two main social cognitive theories. One would be self-efficacy theory, and the other would be theory of planned behavior. I've always had a lot of respect for self-efficacy theory. I think SDT agrees that feelings of efficacy and perceived competence in a domain of activity is really important. I think the contrast for us with social cognitive theory, at least in Bandura's work, has been the issue of autonomy. Bandura did not emphasize autonomy. In fact, in some writings says autonomy doesn't really matter, but we think it matters a lot, that in order to sustain activity over time, competence alone won't do it. You also need to have strong volition and willingness. So I think many of the techniques used in self-efficacy theory to build competence are good, and they can complement those that we use in SDT. I think one of the dangers if you don't have a strong respect of autonomy is you may try and build competence using controlling methods that then undermines long-term persistence. Theory of planned behavior is a bit different in that regard. There's been some attempts to integrate SDT with theory of planned behavior, at least in empirical models, and some of those have been, I think, edifying, enlightening a bit. I think one of the things that has been shown a lot is that the more a person has autonomous motivation, the more likely they are to have an intention to behave, which in turn will predict behavior. So theory of planned behavior sticks in a few more proximal nodes in its model, like the intention to behavior loop in there. I think there's a lot of convergence between theory of planned behavior and SDT that I think it can continue to be built upon over time. I think it's nice when multiple theories try and tackle the same problem. You see both the contrasts and the differences between them, as well as the commonalities. Again, all these theories put a big load of emphasis on efficacy. I think SDT alone puts a big load of emphasis on autonomy and relatedness as really important factors, and that's the difference.
Well, great, Rich. I really want to thank you for this very interesting question and answering session that we had. Pedro, you are still there? Great. So I would like to give the word to you, Pedro. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. Thanks, Steph, for a great job handling the discussion period. Not easy to handle all this live, and thanks, Rich, for being with us. It's also not screen. I'm struggling here talking to 165 people that I don't see. So I think you did an excellent job. You must be much more experienced than I am. Anyway, I thought this was a great success. We had about 200 people engaged and attending. So by all means, all measures, this was a success, and I'm hoping we can do this again. I thought we got a great overview of the theory by pretty much the best person that could give us one. Also, lots of nice thoughts and links to further explorations, which I'm hoping many of you might pick up on. ISBNPA is, of course, a research-focused society. Many of you in attendance are researchers, and I know that there are many exciting and open questions, as Rich mentioned, that are there to be tested regarding intervention, but also other areas of the theory. And I encourage all of you to test them in the best research that we can do. That's, I think, the best way to contribute, both to developing the theory and also to apply it and to make it more useful in real life. Again, the slides and the recording will be available to all of you that participated, probably also available to the general community as a whole. So keep in touch with the site for more information on that. And let me also let you know, for those of you that don't know, that the SCT is a fantastic website, which is a great resource for those of you that want to explore. And many of the references and the scholars that have worked on STT are listed there, and you can follow all the research. You have assessment measures as well there, and so it's a great resource. Also, the conference that will take place next year in June, very close to ISBNPA, but not overlapping, so many of you might be able to do both. And finally, there's also the Center for Self-Determination Theory, which will be coming up and providing everyone with resources, and many of them research-related. So again, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. And if not before, I hope to see you in Cape Town in 2016. Thanks.
Victoria.
That's the SCT one. I hope to see you on both.
This is Rick. I want to thank Rich, Pedro, and Steph for all their efforts in this very interesting and interactive presentation, and also you as an audience. I I do have a small request to you as an audience. We do have some questions that may pop up, well, that will pop up after we close the webinar. So if you can answer them, we'll be really grateful. So we can actually see what you think of this webinar. So thank you all. And then we are going to close the webinar.
Bye-bye.
So goodbye all.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Thanks.